My name is Maria, and this happened to me when I was 15 years old. I live in a quiet suburban neighborhood where nothing exciting ever really happens, or at least that's what I used to think. This story changed everything. I've never shared it publicly before, but maybe putting it out there will help me finally move on. To this day, I still get chills thinking about it. It was a Friday night, and I was staying over at my best friend Clara's house. Our other friend Sophia was there too, making it a small but fun sleepover. Clara's house was the perfect place for it. Her parents were always so laid back, and her living room was cozy, with a huge TV for movies. The house itself was tucked away at the end of a long street with woods behind it. During the day, it was charming. At night, it felt a little too quiet. We spent the evening watching scary movies and joking around. By the time the clock struck 1 a.m., we were running low on energy, but still giggling over dumb inside jokes. Clara's parents had already gone to bed, leaving us free to stay up as late as we wanted. The living room lights were dim, the glow of the TV the only real source of light. That's when I first noticed it. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw something move. Just outside the large living room window, there was a shadow. It was quick, like a flicker, and for a second I thought it might have been my imagination. "Did you see that?" I asked, trying to keep my voice casual. "See what?" Sophia replied, tossing a handful of popcorn into her mouth. I hesitated, not wanting to sound paranoid. "I don't know, maybe a tree branch or something. Never mind." Clara rolled her eyes. "You're just spooked from the movie. Chill out." I laughed it off, but something about it didn't sit right with me. The window was huge, spanning almost the entire wall of the living room, and it didn't have curtains, just a sheer white drape that barely blocked anything. Beyond it, there was nothing but darkness, and whatever was lurking out there. A little while later, Sophia got up to grab snacks from the kitchen. She was only gone for a minute before we heard her scream. Clara and I jumped up, our hearts racing. Sophia came running back into the living room, her face pale. She pointed at the window, struggling to speak. "There's someone out there!" She finally managed to get out. I froze. Clara ran to her side, trying to calm her down, but Sophia wasn't imagining things. I turned to look at the window and my blood went cold. A man was standing there, pressed against the glass, staring directly at us. He didn't move. He didn't say anything. He just stood there, his face partially obscured by the reflection of the TV screen. But I could see his eyes. They were wide, unblinking, and they seemed to be fixed on me. "What the hell?" Clara shouted, grabbing her phone. "Call your parents," I yelled, my voice trembling. Clara's hands were shaking so much that she fumbled her phone, dropping it onto the carpet. Sophia and I backed away from the window, our hearts pounding. The man still didn't move. He just stood there, watching us. Finally, Clara got her parents on the phone. Her dad came rushing downstairs within seconds, armed with a baseball bat. He turned on the porch light and threw open the front door, yelling at whoever was out there. But by the time he stepped outside, the man was gone. The police were called, and they arrived about 20 minutes later. They searched the area, but didn't find anyone. One of the officers took our statements, while the others checked the property. I thought maybe it was just some random creep trying to scare us, but what they told us next made my stomach turn. Apparently, a house a few streets over had been broken into that same night. The intruder didn't just stop at robbery, he assaulted the couple who lived there, before disappearing into the night. The description of the suspect matched the man we saw at the window. The officers advised us to lock all the doors and windows and stay together for the rest of the night. Clara's dad stayed up, keeping watch, while the three of us huddled together in Clara's room. None of us slept. Even after I went home the next day, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. I kept replaying that moment in my head. The man's face, those eyes. For weeks, I avoided sleepovers altogether, too terrified to stay anywhere but my own home. And even now, years later, I still check my windows every night before going to bed. People say sleepovers are supposed to be fun, but for me, they'll always remind me of that night and the stranger who turned a simple night of laughter and movies into one of the most terrifying experiences of my life. My name is Jack, and I'm 14 years old. I live in a small town in Ohio where everyone knows everyone, or at least they think they do. This happened last summer, and I still can't get it out of my head. It's the kind of thing that makes you question people, even the ones you think you know best. Dylan and I have been best friends since 4th grade. He lived just a few blocks away, so we'd hang out almost every weekend. One Friday night, Dylan invited me over for a sleepover. His parents were always nice, but they were also a little strict. There were certain rules in their house that were non-negotiable, like never going into the basement. Dylan told me it had always been locked, and his parents never gave a reason why. That night, it was just me, Dylan, and our friend Liam. We were playing video games in Dylan's room when Dylan suddenly grinned and said, "Want to do something crazy?" Liam and I exchanged looks. "Like what?" I asked. "We're gonna check out the basement," Dylan said, lowering his voice like he was sharing some huge secret. Liam shook his head. "Dude, your parents will kill us." "Only if they find out," Dylan replied, smirking. He pulled a small screwdriver from his desk drawer. "I've been practicing. I think I can pick the lock." I should have said no. My gut told me this was a bad idea, but Dylan had this way of making everything seem like an adventure, and honestly, I was curious. What was so important that his parents had to keep it locked away? We crept downstairs, trying not to make any noise. The house was silent except for the faint hum of the refrigerator. Dylan led the way to the basement door, which was at the end of a narrow hallway. He knelt down and started fiddling with the lock, while Liam and I stood watch. It took him a couple of minutes, but eventually we heard a soft click. "Got it," Dylan whispered, pushing the door open. The stairs leading down were steep and creaky. Dylan grabbed a flashlight from a shelf nearby, and we slowly descended into the darkness. The air down there was damp and heavy, and it smelled faintly of mildew. As Dylan swept the flashlight around, the beam revealed a room filled with strange objects. There were thick ropes coiled in one corner, chains hanging from the ceiling, and an old rusty metal cage pushed against the wall. Inside the cage was a filthy blanket and what looked like an empty dog bowl. Liam muttered, "What the hell is this?" My heart was pounding. I wanted to say something, but the words wouldn't come out. The whole scene felt wrong, like we had stumbled into a place we weren't meant to see. "Dylan," I finally managed, "we should go." But before anyone could move, we heard footsteps above us. Heavy, deliberate footsteps heading toward the basement door. The three of us froze. The door creaked open, and a beam of light spilled down the stairs. Then came a voice, deep and angry. "What are you doing down here?" It was Dylan's dad. He stormed down the stairs, his face twisted with rage. "Who told you you could come down here?" he shouted. Dylan stammered, I just wanted to see." His dad grabbed him by the arm and yanked him toward the stairs. "Get out, all of you. Now." We didn't need to be told twice. Liam and I scrambled up the stairs, with Dylan right behind us. Dylan's mom appeared in the hallway, her face pale. She didn't say anything, just looked at us with wide eyes as Dylan's dad slammed the basement door shut and locked it. That night, we didn't talk about what had happened. We just went back to Dylan's room and pretended to play video games, though none of us were really focused. I kept glancing at the door, half expecting his dad to come bursting in. Around midnight, I heard muffled voices coming from downstairs. It was Dylan's parents. I couldn't make out everything they were saying, but one sentence stuck with me. "He's not supposed to be back yet." The rest of the night passed in uneasy silence. I barely slept. The next morning, I told Dylan I wasn't feeling well and left early. As I walked home, I kept replaying everything in my head. The ropes, the cage, the argument. It didn't make sense, but I couldn't shake the feeling that whatever was happening in that basement was something terrible. I tried to distance myself from Dylan after that. He'd text me sometimes, asking why I wasn't coming over anymore, but I always made up excuses. Eventually, we drifted apart. To this day, I still wonder about that basement. Who was Not supposed to be back yet. What were the ropes and cage for? I'll probably never know, but one thing's for sure. Some secrets are better left undiscovered. My name is Chloe. I'm 16 years old, and I live in a small, quiet town in Maine. Our house isn't particularly old, but it has that creaky charm that can feel cozy or eerie, depending on the situation. I never gave much thought to the attic until one sleepover changed everything. It was a Saturday night, and my best friends, Lily and Grace, were staying over. We'd planned the usual: movies, snacks, and gossiping late into the night. My parents were downstairs watching TV, so we had free reign upstairs. After a couple of hours, we got restless. That's when Grace suggested exploring the attic. At first, I hesitated. "There's nothing interesting up there," I told them. "Just old junk." "Exactly why we should check it out." Lily grinned, already heading toward the attic hatch in the hallway ceiling. The attic ladder creaked as we climbed up one by one. The air was thick and stale, and a single dim bulb cast long, eerie shadows. Most of the space was filled with dusty boxes, forgotten furniture, and cobwebs. "This is straight out of a horror movie," Grace joked, but her voice had an edge of nervousness. As we poked around, Lily suddenly stopped. "What's that?" she said, pointing to a stack of boxes shoved against the far wall. Behind them was a small door. It was almost child-sized, with peeling paint and a rusted latch. "I've lived here my whole life, and I've never seen this before," I murmured. "Let's open it," Lily said. I wasn't so sure, but my curiosity got the better of me. Lily unlatched the door, and it creaked open to reveal a tiny room. Inside was a metal frame bed with a filthy, thin mattress. Next to it, a wooden nightstand held a cracked lamp. There was an odd smell, like stale sweat and mildew. On the bed were a pile of clothes, men's clothes. They were old and worn, but they didn't look like they'd been there for years. "Guys, this is seriously weird," Grace whispered. Then Lily picked up a notebook from the nightstand. It was tattered, with pages full of shaky handwriting. She flipped it open, and we crowded around her. At first, it seemed like random ramblings, dates, meaningless phrases, but then we found a page that stopped us cold. "I can hear them laughing downstairs. They don't know I'm here. The girl, Chloe, she leaves her window open sometimes. She doesn't know I'm watching." My stomach dropped. That was my name. "This isn't funny," I said, my voice shaking. "It's not a joke," Grace replied, looking as pale as I felt. We left the attic as fast as we could, slamming the hatch shut behind us. My parents were still downstairs, so we showed them the notebook and told them everything. My mom waved it off as probably some junk left by the previous owners. But that night, I couldn't sleep. Lily and Grace had passed out on the floor of my room, but I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. That's when I heard it. Soft footsteps. At first, I told myself it was just my imagination, but then they came again, louder this time, right above us in the attic. I shook Lily and Grace awake. "Do you hear that?" I whispered. We sat frozen, listening as the faint creaks moved across the ceiling. My heart was racing. I grabbed my phone and called my dad. He and my mom came upstairs, but by the time they got there, the sounds had stopped. "It's just the house settling," my dad said, but I could see the doubt in his eyes. We called the police. When they arrived, they searched the attic thoroughly. At first, they didn't find anything, but then one of the officers noticed the small door we'd discovered. Inside, crouched in the corner, was a man. He was filthy, with wild eyes and matted hair. Clutched in his hands was the notebook. He didn't resist as the officers pulled him out. It turned out he'd been living in that hidden room for months, maybe longer. He'd been sneaking down when no one was home, taking food, and watching us through vents. The thought still makes my skin crawl. After that night, my parents had the attic sealed off. But no matter how secure the house feels, I still hear those phantom creaks sometimes, and every time I wonder, is he really gone?